Hi, I'm AJ. I'm a current student here at Joshua, and this is the Joshua Wilderness Survival Podcast. Glad to have you here, Doug.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I kind of just want to talk about how you've been involved at Hume, and more specifically, how you got involved with Joshua.
Yeah. So Hume Lake is one of these great places that I've heard of for a long time. My family came actually during COVID and spent a week during a summer here. So that was my first actual on-the-ground Hume Lake experience. But shortly, not that long after that, I had an opportunity to meet Dallas at a mutual friend. It was Eric Thomas's house. And there was this conversation about, because COVID shut down the Joshua Wilderness Institute for a little while, about restarting it, and might I be interested in being a part of teaching at Hume, and I immediately said yes, wanted to be part of Joshua Wilderness Institute. So this is my third year being here. I've loved the experience every year. Yeah,
we're glad to have you here. What did you talk about this week?
I changed it a little bit over the years, but I'm a biologist, and what the Lord really called me to in my scientific work is a critique of Darwinism and materialism, these corrosive ideas that are really replacement for the scriptural idea that God created and that we are the product of His creation. So I like to make that kind of the center theme, is helping students. Everyone's encountered this counterfeit idea about life and about us, helping students to have kind of simple ways of knowing that that's not true, and that the true, genuine account of us from Scripture is true. But I've also this year brought in some talk about artificial intelligence as well. And they seem like very different subjects, but the connection is some of the deception about a material world and we're the products of accident actually becomes kind of the philosophy behind strong AI, these claims that machines can do what we do, because we're just machines after all. We're chemical machines, so why wouldn't a in silico machine be able to do what we do, or even better than us? Yeah. And it's part of this sort of inverted view that if you don't believe that God made us and we made AI and robots and all the things that we make, if you don't see that as placing God above us and us above the things we make, and you reject God and say, well, no, little things, chemistry made us, and therefore the things that we make could rise above us. Yeah. It's all part of a deception.
Yeah. I know have you read Mere Christianity?
Yeah.
I know Lewis talks about how God can only beget God. So He begets the Son, and then He creates us, a lesser being. And then we can only beget man. We cannot create something greater than ourselves.
Right. And the things we create are definitely inferior to us, because we stand above the things that we make. And so to say, oh, we're making something that's going to become better than us and be an end to us, that's just nonsense. But it's nonsense that has a philosophical strand to it that I'm really eager to point out the fallacy of.
Yeah. I do want to explore a little more the idea of the strictly material world. Yeah. Because you talked a lot about mind, body, and spirit. So I kind of want to pick out the differences here.
Right. So in one of the sessions, I pointed out that there's a deep contradiction with the idea that we are just material things, that we're just chemicals doing what chemicals do. And I do that by saying it's a self-defeating claim to say that a human is nothing but a chemical thing. And the reason it's self-defeating is it contradicts your own perception of what you're doing when you're thinking. Because I think I'm thinking thoughts, I think I'm manipulating concepts when I think, and I think those concepts are not material things. And what that means is you could put any material thing before me and say, is this what you mean by 3, the number 3? And I'll say, that's an example of 3, but that's not the essence of 3. I'm thinking of a concept, triangles, 3, beauty, all these things that we are manipulating when we think are concept, and they're not material things. And if someone wants to insist that you're wrong about that, what they're really saying is you're crazy. Yeah. That what you think you're doing, you're not doing at all. But once you go down the path of I'm crazy and deceived, then everything's gone. Science is gone, everything is gone. So we talked about that, and then what we landed on is that forces you to an understanding of humanity that says we do have this physical material body, which is marvelous, and we spent some time today or yesterday looking at how marvelous it is, but we're not just the physical body. We're an immaterial mind, soul, spirit that is knit by God's design to a physical body.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to. I wrote down a question. I forgot it.
No worries.
Yes, I want to talk more about the aesthetic argument, and like
which we talked about today.
Yeah, we did talk about it today, and I thought it was amazing. And not only the aesthetic argument in creatures and plants, but also humanity, and kind of tie yesterday's talk in today.
Yeah.
Because you talked about what was the term you used as far as like things like build on top of each other?
Functional coherence.
Functional coherence. Yeah, that was crazy because I mean we're made up of thousands of cells that are made up of thousands of proteins and like all of this. And so I want to talk about your experiment a little bit where you rearranged a gene and then also the beauty of the natural world.
Sure. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about work that I did in the UK. I was in a lab in Cambridge, actually a couple of labs where I did this work. And the question I was asking is how fussy is a gene about its sequence? A gene is a sequence in DNA that's telling a cell how to make a sequence of amino acids that makes a protein. So you're going from a language of A, C's, G's, and T's, those are the DNA bases, to an alphabet, you could call it, to a 20-character alphabet because there's 20 amino acids, and the genetic code is how, it's brilliant, it's how God designed life to translate a sequence that's in the alphabet of A, C, G, and T to a chain that's amino acids, and there's 20 different amino acids. And so I started to wonder if there was a way to measure how precise these sequences need to be in order to produce something that actually works. And we talked a little bit about this. There's a gene that I picked, put it in bacteria, messed it up, made millions of different messed up versions of it, and then tested in the bacteria to see which of those messed up versions still work. And that gives me a fraction of the possibilities that are the sweet spot, the things that work. And if you multiply that out, I did it on little parts of this protein at a time. If you multiply out the whole result, you end up with just a really, really strikingly rare picture of what it takes to have something work. 1 in 10 to the 77th power. So I tried to unpack what that looks like.
Very large
That's
number.
like hitting it's for a chance to hit something like that would be impossible.
Yeah. And then for taking it back today, as far as like design, we watched an amazing video of a cheetah running, which is actually one of my favorite animals.
They're wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing how they work and how fast they can go. What is their top speed?
About 70 miles per hour.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Considerably higher than my top speed.
Yes, mine as well. So a little bit of what that looks like as far as like the intuitive design that we can just see if we actually look at it.
Yeah, so the idea there is, there's a brute fact that a cheetah runs fast, and there's a brute fact that it has to run fast if it's going to catch fast-running prey. But what I think this National Geographic video captures well is it's not just brute fast. It's kind of like an analogy to cars. You can throw and we used to do this when we like rebuild cars and make hot rods. You can throw a big engine in an ugly car and you might get something that goes fast. That's not what a cheetah is.
Not elegant.
This is like a Ferrari. It's like a beautiful car that is fast is what we prize in cars. And cheetah is that. It's not just that it's fast, it's beautiful and elegant in how it moves.
Yeah. And furthermore, you brought up the idea of altruism.
Yeah.
And how in creation we see these ideas of this theme of sacrifice that God has implanted in almost everything. I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So altruism is something that biologists recognize, and they've written books on it, and they've tried to give a Darwinian explanation for altruism. Excuse me. That's the idea of individuals in a species, sometimes at cost to themselves, helping others of their kind, of their species. And this is common in life. It actually doesn't square with Darwinism, because Darwinism, origin of species, so it squares with survival of species, but Darwin's book is called On the Origin of Species. And for species to originate, you actually have to have competition within a species, which means siblings should not help siblings. You shouldn't help your cousins, because you might be the next branch that's superior to your cousins. That's the Darwinian picture of life. And so Darwinists have spent a lot of time trying to say, well, there's so much obvious altruism out there. How do you account for it in a Darwinian framework? And they've written books on it. It doesn't actually work. It does work in terms of perpetuation of a species, but that's not what Darwinism is about. It's about origin of species. But I introduced a new term that I use in my course called uber altruism. And this is like altruism on steroids. It's an individual at cost to itself benefiting an individual of another species. And this is just totally radically anti-Darwinian, because it's species A doing something for the benefit of species B, sacrificially doing something. So at cost to itself doing something for the benefit of species B. And this turns out to be widespread in the living world. You can see, we talked about the herring, the Norwegian orca, and the herring, how there's a behavior of the herring that actually enables the orca to feed on herring, and it's unusual behavior that seems designed in the herring as if one of the roles of the herring is to reproduce and have more herring, but another role is to be food for the orca, which is a wild idea. But you see this over and over again in nature. You see it in plants, and we talked about trees, and how some trees can just be prolific in sending out seeds. And then there's other trees like the peach tree that make far fewer seeds, and they, at cost to themselves, make this beautiful fruit, a peach, with a big seed in it. Well, that's nothing like this cottonwood tree that sends out 1 million seeds. Here you're laboring over 200 seeds. Why do you do that? Well, it's for us, because we get peaches. And that's another example. It's the peach, one of the created kinds, the peach tree, at cost to itself, laboring over these fruit for us to benefit. And so it perfectly squares with the Genesis account. It doesn't square at all with Darwinism.
And you brought up mosquitoes.
And they are not my favorite creature. I like cheetahs more than mosquitoes.
Me too. Let's unpack that.
So mosquitoes, I gave them as an example of in a sort of a Darwinian view of life. If it's all about ruthless survival, you should have animals with a good offense, animals with a good defense, or rapid reproducers. And mosquitoes are rapid reproducers, and we don't like them. They're such rapid reproducers. It turns out if you look at design of living things, not just for the function of the species itself, which would be a Darwinian. In a Darwinian world, everything's out for itself. So whatever I am, I'm being fashioned by circumstances to try to reproduce better and to outcompete. In a non-Darwinian world, in the world that's described by Scripture, it isn't that everything's out for itself. It's that you have these complex and beautiful relationships. We mentioned the herring and the orca, the peach and us. You have these beautiful relationships in the whole system that hold the whole system together. And so could a mosquito be in that? And I only came across this, someone else told me about this a couple of years ago, because I would have said, I can't think of one good thing about mosquitoes. I can't think of one good thing. But there is a good thing, and it's this. And I realized this when the person told me. I've had this experience backpacking where we've set up camp. We're on this beautiful lake, and in the early morning and in the evening, there's like a mist of mosquitoes, like a foot over the lake, that just cover the whole lake. And I think, wow. And of course, we're slathering ourselves with spray, so we're not tormented by these things. But this person told me, if you didn't have mosquitoes in fresh water, wildlife like deer would stay in the water, and they'd spend a lot of time in the water, and they'd be pooping in the water, and you'd be messing up your water environment because the animals would be hanging out in the water. And the mosquito is annoying to a deer as it's annoying to us. In deer, because you have the fur, they're getting bit around the eye when they go to the water. They have to go to the water to drink, but they don't want to stay there because they find it so annoying. And that's, you see the tail flicks and the ear flicks. They're constantly trying to get these bugs off me. They go to the water because they have to, but the mosquito says, don't stay here. Don't congregate here. Get your water and then get out of here. And that actually serves a function for lakes.
Brings a new appreciation for me.
Yeah. I still don't like it. But
No, neither do I, but something to consider for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Doug? This week has been awesome. I've been on the edge of my seat the entire time, and I loved having you. So thank you for your time.
It's been great to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You bet.